Good afternoon or good morning to many of you out there, and welcome to this afternoon's Agricultural Data Webinar. My name is Lance Honig. I am the chair of the Ag Statistics Board and director of the Methodology Division here at NASS. I want to thank you for being with us this afternoon. We're going to keep things pretty quick as we move through. You know, we only set a 30-minute time window here, so we want to be respectful of your time as we go through things here. If we go to the next slide here, we're going to just give you a quick overview of what we're going to do today. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes going over a few housekeeping items relative to any Zoom meeting. You're probably familiar, but we'll go over them very quickly anyway. I'll give a little bit of background as to what brought us to this point. Then we've got a couple of opportunities to talk specifically about some of the other data sources that exist that can help to inform around some of these programs that NASS had to cut or eliminate here just recently. And then, of course, our goal is to have some live Q&A toward the end, and then we'll wrap things up. So from a housekeeping standpoint, as with any Zoom meeting, if you need to utilize the closed captioning services, you want to just make sure you click that closed caption button that should be in your ribbon. We do have those services available today. Much like we do with our data user meetings that we host twice a year, we will be recording this webinar and making it available online. You see the link listed there, and I believe Marissa is also going to drop the links as we talk about them into the chat, so you'll be able to access them quickly now and then access everything after the meeting as well. In addition to the recording of the webinar itself, these slides and also the transcript of the Q&A will be posted on the website as well, and that will include both questions and answers to the questions that we may or may not get time to answer live on here toward the end. Okay, in addition to that, there's really only two buttons that you really need to worry about from a communication standpoint. Again, when we talk about the Q&A, that's the button we want you to use to post questions. We'll be reading from there, capturing things there and answering from that point. The chat option, as I mentioned, Marissa will be dropping some links and other relevant information in there throughout the meeting, but also that's where you would have an opportunity to communicate with us if you have any technical issues during this webinar, or if you need to, you can always reach out to Marissa directly at the email address listed there. And before I forget, this is my opportunity to thank Marissa for pulling this all together. Everything logistically speaking would not have happened if it wasn't for Marissa. So thank you for that. All right, so here's who we have on board for you today. I've already introduced myself. In addition to that, we've got Troy Joshua. He is our Executive Director of the Ag Statistics Board and Statistics Division Director here at NASS. He's going to be sharing some things with you in just a moment. And then also I want to thank Schwan Pham from the Risk Management Agency. She is online with us this afternoon to help assist with any questions around the RMA data toward the end of this presentation as well. So thank you to all our panelists today. So how did we get to this point? I want to be very brief here because we do have such a limited amount of time. But if we go back to early to mid-March, NASS received our appropriation for fiscal year 2024, $187.5 million. That was pretty far below the president's budget for FY24 and also well below our actual appropriations for FY23. You combine that with increasing costs and an implemented pay increase. And so we had a fairly significant budget. I won't call it a shortfall, but a gap that we needed to account for as we move through the remainder of this fiscal year. We started out by going through internally all of our operations, both strategically and deliberately, to find all the cost savings we could. This included reducing things like travel and training costs, as well as looking at some of the interactions that we have directly with producers while we're conducting surveys to minimize some of the costs there. And quite frankly, we virtually stopped all efforts we have underway to modernize our aging systems here at NASS. And so we did everything we could to avoid all the costs possible without having impact directly on the customers. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, that in itself was not enough. And so on April 9th, we did have to announce some program reductions We issued an ASB notice. You can see the link there. But essentially, we announced the elimination of the July cattle survey, all crop and livestock county level estimates, and the cotton objective yield survey. Back on April 16th at our USDA data users meeting, we talked at length about kind of how we got to that point, how we made those decisions, things of that nature. And so if you want more detail and background specifically on that, I would direct you to, again, that link where you can watch the recording, read the Q&A, and hopefully get the questions answered around that there. But as we moved forward since April 16th and really since April 9th, we've had many conversations with customers, including industry groups, as well as other analysts and such who rely on some of this information. And part of what came out of those conversations was a deep level of interest in what are some of the other data products that are out there that might inform around some of these programs. And in fact, it was suggested on multiple occasions that we could perhaps have a webinar just to highlight what some of those items are. And so that's what we're going to do here today. That's why we have this webinar. And so we're going to kind of move into that now. I'm going to turn things over to Troy, and he's going to talk about some of the other NASS data that's available in this space. Troy?
Thank you, Lance. And I appreciate everyone giving me this opportunity to share some information with you pertaining towards what NASS has available. And we realize that July cattle, the data that we are going to be providing you do not replace the July cattle survey. And the first item would be January cattle. The one concern is that it is January cattle, it's not July. We realize that information. The next item would be cattle on feed. NASS, and we have several links that we're going to be placing in the chat so that you will have that information available to you. But cattle on feed, NASS survey produces monthly with 1,000 heads or more capacity for 16 states. NASS releases monthly data on the 3rd or the 4th Friday of every month for 12 states and the US. In the release, NASS publishes the total number of feed, placement by weight group, marketings, and other disappearance for feedlots. On a quarterly basis, January, April, June, and October, NASS provides number of feed by class by states in the US. The next publication I would like to highlight would be milk production. NASS publishes monthly the number of milk cows, production per cow, and total milk production during preceding months for 24 states and the US. On a quarterly basis, January, April, June, and October, NASS survey produces in all 50 states and publishes quarterly data in all states and the US as well. The next publication I would like to highlight would be livestock slaughter. Every month, NASS publishes the number of head, live weight, and dress weight of cattle and calves slaughtered in commercial plants, and number by class in federally inspected plants by state. Cold storage. NASS publishes monthly for the previous end of month stocks of meats, and dairy products in public, private, and semi-private refrigerated warehouses for regional and the national levels. The next item would be dairy products. NASS releases monthly data on production of butter, cheese, frozen products, evaporated, condensed dry milk, and whey products. Shipment stocks, prices of dry milk and whey products for major producing states in the US. And finally, it's the Census of Agriculture. On February 13th, we are proud that we published the Census of Agriculture, which is the most complete assessment of the agriculture. And that information is published at the state and national level, but also at the county levels. And next week, we're going to be publishing data at the congressional districts as well. I just wanted to share that information with you, that we realize that is not a replacement for the July cattle survey, but we do have data points for the dairy and cattle industry. Next slide. County estimates is another item that we have had a lot of conversations about. And NASS published data on cropland data programs provided on an annual basis on planted crops for the contiguous US at a 30-meter resolution. We realize that it's not a replacement for county estimates, but we do have some information at that level. But not only that, we also heard information pertaining towards NASS disaster programs. But NASS monitor agricultural disasters in near real time and provide quantitative assessment using Earth observations and geospatial techniques. We realize that, hey, again, it is not a replacement, but we do have data points that is available, and we are sharing the links that is available to them, to the data as well. We have done a lot of assessment, have a lot of conversation with stakeholders, and we are continuously providing this information to them. Lance, you have.
All right, thank you, Troy. Before I talk about this slide, I just want to remind folks that now might be a great time. If you got questions, go ahead and start typing them in using the Q&A button, because we are going to be through this here pretty shortly and ready for questions. So you might want to get in the queue now. So thank you, Troy, for talking about some of those other data items that exist here at NASS in this space. But we also wanted to take the opportunity to highlight some information specifically for county estimates, and in fact, more specifically, crop county estimates for the most part, that you can find information at other sources of USDA as well to help inform around that space. Two agencies that I want to highlight. We'll start with the Farm Service Agency. Most folks are probably aware of this, but some may not be. The Farm Service Agency, as part of the work that they do, comes in contact with a great deal of information about crop acreage, in particular, producers who want to participate in any of the programs administered by FSA and others at USDA. They are required to report and certify their acreage planted information for various crops. As a result of that, our friends over at FSA publish that information at the link you can see on the screen. If you don't want to follow the link, I can tell you firsthand experience. If you Google FSA certified acres, it comes up very quickly for you. But what you'll find there is throughout the growing season, starting in August and then finalizing in January, they will post updates as to what those totals are by crop, by county. You will get both acreage planted as well as some information about prevent plant acres, acres failed, pieces of information like that in Excel spreadsheets that you can quickly and easily download to gain insight into particularly some very complete acreage information by county for all of the major crops, and certainly all of the crops that NASS was previously publishing at the county level. In addition to that, over at the Risk Management Agency, or RMA, of course, they have responsibility for overseeing and administering the crop insurance programs here at USDA. And of course, as a result of their work, they also have a great deal of data and information about crops grown and insured here in the US. There's a couple of links that I've included on the screen here for you. The first is their summary of business. This has a ton of information available around all the different products that they are selling policies for, information about number of policies, acres insured, things of that nature. Again, an opportunity for you to gain insight into some acreage information by policy, by type, down to the county level. And then in addition to that, this is some information we talked about at Data Users that a lot of folks were not necessarily familiar with. And so we wanted to make sure we highlighted it here. And that is some historic yield information that exists from RMA down to the county level as well. We've got a link there where you can go out and generate at the county level by policy type yields for a number of previous seasons. And so you can go back and build your history for all of these products, as well as gaining insight into current data. And so these are both great sources of information that we think are out there for you to utilize in lieu of some of the county level data that NASS was previously publishing. All right, so that kind of highlights the products that we wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to be aware of and provide some information as to exactly where you can find it. And so for the last 10 minutes or so that we have left in our time here, we want to go through and answer some of the questions that you've got. And so much like we do at our data user setting, what I will do is I will go out to the Q&A and read a question, and between myself, Troy, and Schwan, we will do our best to get those questions answered for you. So first of all here, first question I see is from Brian Vikstrom. For county level estimates, does removing that program have an impact on FSA data, and was that an input? I will go ahead and tackle that question, I believe. So as we were finalizing our decisions as to how we were going to save or achieve these cost savings, we did reach out to FSA and FPAC in general here at USDA, had a conversation with them around how they utilize that data. And bottom line is it is going to have a minimal, very minimal impact on the work that they're doing there. They rely primarily on the same information that we just talked about from the risk management agency. And so some changes were made a few years ago that, you know, in the past, yes, this would have had a big impact, but because of changes that they've made and how they utilize data, this really is not having a big impact on that process. All right, Carson Ford asks, would the county level production data return if funding was restored? Troy, do you want to take that one?
Sure. And the answer to that question is yes. We are in a data, producing business. So if the funding was restored, or if the funding is restored, we will definitely bring that program back, because we have heard from our data users of how valuable this information is to them.
All right, thank you, Troy. Moving down the list here. Bruce Sherrick says the NASS county level data for major crops are incredibly valuable and represent one of the most important data products from USDA. These data support untold research efforts at universities and private companies. Is there any chance to restore funding in time to continue in an uninterrupted fashion? It is a far more important than many of the other programs supported in the commodity title or ad hoc programs. I would hope a sensible realignment from other expenditures could be considered. Troy, you want to take that one as well?
Sure. Currently, right now, we are in our planning stage. There is a time. We do have enough time to bring the project back, but time is ticking. When we first started this process off, when we made our decision, we had basically 6 months to the end of the fiscal year. Now we have 5 or more like 4 months left in the fiscal year. So we would love to bring the program back, but we have to make a decision more like sooner than later.
All right, thank you, Troy. I've got a question here from Ann Johann Schwan. I think this one's going to be for you. Excuse me. Will RMA consider releasing county yield information sooner than they have been, so it is closer to the NASS typical release date of late February versus mid-June?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. So the answer is that we cannot do it sooner, because our area yield data that we published, they are from the previous crop year. And since RMA, we received this data from the approved insurance provider. So those are the insurance company that we work with. We get the data from them, and there is typically a lag. So the earliest that we can release data from the previous crop year is starting in mid-May. And then there is a large number of data releases in June, and it goes all the way in July. So it's just the way that the crop insurance reporting cycle works. We cannot publish it any sooner.
Okay, thank you, Schwan.
No problem.
Question here from Tanner Bamer. Is the raw data for the disaster analysis tool collected from the same sources as the county estimates? If not, how do the two differ? I guess I'll take an initial crack at that. And if we want more technical details, we can probably include a bit of an expansion on this in our results when we post it online. But the bottom line is the disaster analysis work that we do is typically very heavily driven by satellite imagery or remote sensing type work. And so the short answer would be no, it is not collected from the same source. We will include in our response a link to the page was linked back on the slides. You'll be able to access it there. But in addition to the products, there's a little bit of background information out there as well, I think, that could help maybe provide a little bit more clarity as to exactly what we do there. But it is remote sensing driven or satellite driven information there. All right, next question up is from Jerry Goodell. How much appropriation will be needed to restore? Troy, do you want to crack that one?
Thanks, Lance. For the July cattle, it costs approximately $550,000 to restore that program. For the county estimates entire program, it costs approximately $7 million to restore that program. So a combination of $750,000 or so, 700, well, I would say more than that, but yeah, $7,500,000 is what it would cost to restore the entire programs. Okay, approximately $7 million for county estimates and $550,000 for the July cattle program.
All right, thank you, Troy. Next, we've got a question here from Colin Waters. When will the cropland data layer be updated? Troy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but typically I believe it's late January when we get those posted out at the end of each crop season.
That is correct.
All right, moving on here, make sure I don't miss anything. All right, we've got that, we've got that.
Okay.
All right, this is from Tanner Bamer. Really appreciate NASS hosting this webinar as well as the in-depth breakdown, which was done at Data Users Meeting last month. Understanding that you all are facing very real budgetary challenges, has NASS done any evaluation of the savings it may realize from altering the July cattle report, similar to the changes announced to the January report, rather than canceling it altogether? If it can cut costs in the January report, it seems it should in the July as well. I'll take a shot at that one, Troy. I've thrown all the budget questions at you up to this point, so it seems only fair. There's a couple of points I would make here. First of all, of course, we can always make some adjustments that way, but typically the type of adjustments that we made to the January report are very small in scope when it comes to a budgetary standpoint. A huge portion of the cost associated with a project like this is, quite frankly, carrying out the project, or in this case, the survey and the report. And so, you know, Troy talked about the $550,000 cost avoidance that comes from not doing the survey. To start to reduce maybe some of the coverage included in the report would certainly reduce some of the quality aspect of it, but would have a fairly minimal impact on the cost associated with that. And so generally speaking, it really wouldn't help solve the issue that we have. And if you remember, in July, we already only publish at the national level in July. And so we really would be truly trimming around the edges for very little cost savings. Do you want to add anything to that, Troy?
Sure. Majority of the costs associated with the July cattle or any of our surveys is data collection. And, you know, when we are asking our respondents to respond to us, you know, we mail out questionnaires, and as we all know, mailing out questionnaires, you know, a year ago compared to where it is today, it has increased. So all of our costs, our variable costs have increased. We have seen that over time. So, and our data collection costs has increased. So that's what's majority of the costs associated with when we're trying to publish this data. It is associated with data collection. Thanks a lot, Lance.
All right, thank you, Troy. I see another question from Jerry Goodell. The FSA has acres, but how do I get a yield idea at the county level? Is the RMA the only place for a general yield idea? From my perspective, it would be the only source I'm aware of. Troy, Schwan, are either of you aware of anything else?
I'm not.
Okay. We move that one on. All right, probably got time for maybe one or two more questions here. Let me see what we got. All right, we've got a question here. For some minor specialty crops such as turmeric, where can we find total area or production volume? Minor commodities like that, you would have to look at the Census of Agriculture. And of course, we just recently released the 22 census results. So it would certainly point you there for some of those more, quote, minor type crops. All right, let's see, 127. See what we got left here. Doug Gehring, I think this is more of a statement. Many are concerned about the lack of information will allow more manipulation of prices paid for commodities and the ability for wholesale and retail to exploit the consumer. I guess not really a question there, but I would say that we certainly recognize the value and importance of not only this information, but all the information that we publish here at NASS. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it was not our desire to have to stop producing any of these data products. But at the end of the day, we do have to obviously operate within the budget that we do have before us. And so your point is certainly recognized and taken into account. So we got time for one more question here. Let's see if I'm doing my best to wade through the list here. Make sure which ones we have covered. Getting through pretty good here. That one's been answered. My question was answered. I think we're doing pretty good here. All right, here we go. Last question from Nathan Smith. Is cotton objective yield survey included in the $7 million cost figure to restore the survey? Troy, I'll let you follow up on that one since you addressed it first.
It is not included in the $7 million. I was looking for that, Lance, to see exactly how much the objective yield, cotton objective yield survey will cost, but I know it's not included in that $7 million. The $7 million is only for county estimates for commodities as well as crops and livestock.
Right, and we'll be sure and get that amount into the answer when we post it online, but I can tell you it is rough order of magnitude, much more in line with the cost of July cattle than the cost of the county estimates program. All right, so as I mentioned at the beginning, I've got 1:30 on the clock here. We certainly want to be respectful of your time here today. So as we kind of wrap things up here, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank our presenters and the logistics behind the scenes. So Troy, Schwan, Marissa, very much appreciate all your efforts to help make sure that this happened. And of course, to all of our attendees, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Appreciate the engagement with the questions and answers as well. As a reminder, as I mentioned at the beginning, you will be able to find the recording of this webinar as well as the slides and transcript of the Q&A online at the link on the screen and also in your chat window. For those of you that are familiar with our data users meeting, it's the same page. And so if you've been finding things there, you'll find a reference to this meeting there as well. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. We are here for you. So if you have additional questions, you can always reach out to us. We welcome the opportunity to continue the conversation and look forward to talking with you soon. So thanks a lot, everybody. We'll talk to you later.